You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to give you the inspiration you need to get started in the outdoors or keep moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hi friends, thank you for listening in today. It is April the 28th on a Tuesday. Can't believe April's almost over. May is nearly here. School's almost out. I'll bet you have some amazing adventurous plans for the summertime. So jump in the comments, share what some of your plans are. I'm really curious what people are up to. I am looking forward to a glorious Central Colorado summer. Summer here is so pleasant. But this episode is not about summer. This episode is about a book written by Devon O'Neill, and it's very much a book about winter. When Devon and I recorded this, I had not yet read his book, but since then I have. And I have to say, it's just very well done. Devon really took the time to get to know the people and the families involved in this. He really took the time to tell the bigger story, the broader story of what an adventurous life in the Colorado Rockies is like. But more than just that, it's also the heart and soul of the people of Salida, Colorado. I've read a lot of adventure books over the years, obviously, running this podcast. And they're all entertaining. I love them. But a lot of the books are just kind of like, and then we did this, and the next day we did that, and then the next day we did this, which is okay. That's not what this book is. This book really wrestles with the humanity of the people involved in this true story, and Devon knocked it out of the park. I don't know what else to say. I highly recommend it. Go buy the book, read it. It does a really good job of wrestling with some of the dangers of the adventurous lifestyle, but also a lot of the rewards that come with that. It really is a beautiful work. I'm really glad that you are here to hear this today and to be a part of this conversation. I'm not going to go on about it anymore. We'll let Devon share more about it in the interview. But before we dive in, I want to thank all the patrons that we have on Patreon who are supporting the podcast, keeping it going. We really appreciate you, and I probably don't say that enough. So I just want to make sure I say it right now. Thank you very much for your support. Enough said. Let's get into this interview. I have Devon O'Neill with us today, and Devon O'Neill has spent over 2 decades reporting on outdoor adventure, mountain culture, risk and backcountry activities, including things like avalanches and winter risk, the emotional and social dynamics of life in Colorado mountain towns. His work has appeared in publications like Outside, Men's Journal, Bike, ESPN.com, and various ski magazines, and he often explores the allure, dangers, and deeper human elements of mountain living and pursuits. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Yeah, you bet. Devon, you recently released a book. It's called The Way Out, a true story of survival in the heart of the Rockies. So Devon does a lot of writing. He's an adventurer of his own right, and we want to talk about mountain living and all of that. But I think first maybe we should visit the content of this book, Devon. And the reason is because it's an amazing account of how things can be when things go really wrong. And we want to do so with all respect to the people involved. But I think that perhaps going through some of this story could help others to maybe avoid similar mishaps. So, Devon, I know that the story starts with a family with a bunch of teenagers. They decide to go on a 30-minute outing on skis in the backcountry that turned into a 30-hour ordeal, and it did not all end well. So can you fill us in, Devon, on what this was about?
Yeah, this was a hut trip like so many of us kind of seek in a given winter or summer. And it took place at Uncle Bud's, which is a cabin in the Sawatch Range, 11,380 feet outside of Leadville, Colorado. It's part of the 10th Mountain Division Hut Network. And this was 3 families, all from the same small mountain town, Salida, in the Arkansas Valley, about an hour south of where this hut is. And 3 dads and their 4 teenage kids, ranging in age from 15 to 19, went up to this hut on skis, as you said, in January of 2017. The three dads were all really, I mean, these were well-known families from a town of 5,000 people. One of the dads, Brett Beasley, was a U.S. Forest Service employee of almost 20 years. At the time of this trip, he was the snow ranger for the Salida Ranger District, so 440,000 acres of forest. Very experienced guy. Another dad, Joel Shaler, was a family physician, and he had delivered more than 500 babies in Salida over a couple of decades. And the third dad was a guy named Chuck McKenna. Chuck was a former monk and turned educator and licensed counselor. He was the elementary school's principal in town at the time. Yeah, the first morning that they were at the hut, storm started to move in, and Brett and Joel's son Cole, who was 15, kind of found themselves out on the deck before everybody else had finished breakfast and finished gearing up. And they just decided on this impromptu ski run. And they anticipated it would be super quick. They'd get back to the hut, reconvene with their group, and then everybody would go out in unison as had been kind of planned. And Brett and Cole set out, and they just never returned to the hut. And people tried to catch up to them. They tried to find them after a period of hours had passed without them returning. And they never found them. They never came across any like super fresh signs of where they'd been after an initial sighting of their tracks soon after they left the hut. And then this storm moved in and dumped feet of snow in places around the hut. It was an atmospheric river, and it really complicated any searching that was going to be done. And ultimately, the next day, a massive search ensued involving members of the Lake County Search and Rescue Team out of Leadville and a bunch of the hut party's friends and family members. Yeah, a bunch of people, civilians, showed up to help search that day, and it was this just nuclear blizzard, sideways snow, howling wind, very little visibility, very inherently dangerous day to be in the backcountry, especially on anything remotely steep. And so it was really chaotic, really complicated. There were multiple parties out. Not everybody could communicate to each other. There were multiple radio frequencies. And it was really tough for the Lake County Search and Rescue Team to manage this massive showing of civilians as well. And ultimately, a pair of snowmobilers, a guy named Chris Burant, who, when I worked for ESPN, I covered his gold medal winning freestyle snowmobile backflip over a giant gap in Aspen.
Wow.
Chris was known as the Michael Jordan of snowmobiling, and he had a guide, a young kind of his right-hand man named Chase Bunting, who was with him for this search. And they kind of went rogue off on their own, and they ultimately found Brett and Cole trapped in this very steep kind of ravine, avalanche-prone drainage called Porcupine Gulch. And that was the next day, early afternoon of the next day after they had departed the hut the prior morning. And only one survived. And it was a really difficult outcome for their community to grapple with. Not only, did you have this like kind of a winning family and a losing family in some respects, but also just it was such a benign outing that they had gone out for that morning, a quick ski run, like so many of us, myself included. I'm a hut master for the Summit Huts Association. I'm at huts all the time and alone and going ducking away from my chores for a quick ski run if I have time. And, these things almost always end fine. And in this case, a very small outing turned into a tragic event. And also kind of a miraculous event that one of them survived after being out all night with very little clothing, minimal supplies, no phone, no lighter, no way to start a fire, no map, no compass, no knowledge of the area. Disorientation played a big role in this, but, hypothermia is this ever-present danger in the winter when we're recreating, and that played a huge role in what ended up happening. And so I heard about this story almost 2 years after it happened, just from a friend at a concert. He kind of mentioned it to me because he lived in Salida. And I started looking into it. And at that point, I was informed that the lone survivor was not ready to discuss it. And I didn't realize that he had never discussed the full story in any kind of depth with anybody. And so I sat on it for about 3 years and then ultimately got back in touch. And he was ready to talk about it at that point. And we did this gripping interview on the 5-year anniversary of the accident, which neither of us realized at the time. But there were all these signs that had I initially thought I was working on a magazine story for Outside or somebody like that. And it just kept growing and growing. And it touched all these aspects of mountain life that, I struggle with. I struggle to balance like what I want out of my time outdoors and these thrills that we get and seek, and the way that it makes us feel when we go do something fun and radical in the mountains. But also, I'm a dad. I have 2 young kids, and this story ended up just, especially the more time that I got to spend with people who were really close to it, it touched all these things that made it much bigger than just this one event. And I spent about 4 years full-time reporting and writing this. And ultimately, from when I did my first interview to when the book was published this past November, about almost 7 years had elapsed. And it allows for this long-term view of what a traumatic accident and what a traumatic event, certainly in nature, but just in general, can do to us. And grief is so idiosyncratic, how we deal with it, how we find our own way out of this hell that we have to live with sometimes when bad things happen, became a really anchoring theme. But there are other themes as well that carry it, and I think we're going to talk about some of that as well, just the mountain life element and trying to communicate that, the yins and the yangs, and the draw and the peril to those who don't live it. So this book, is published by Harper One, an imprint of HarperCollins, and it's had a national release. And I have heard from people all over the country about how it's made them think differently, maybe about their own lives and certainly their lives as they relate to nature.
In the reviews that I've seen on the book, and I apologize, Devon, I have not had time to read it, but I do want to. I plan to read it very soon. But the word gripping keeps coming up. And I don't even want to pretend to know how it felt for the families involved and how scary things like this can be. It seems innocent enough, just a quick little ski lap, right? And that's the part I think that gets us. And quite often when we talk about tragedy, it's not the big epic thing that ends up being the danger. It's the thing we think is safe that catches us unaware. And I guess I would ask, do you feel like that's in alignment with how this unfolded?
I think absolutely. I think, complacency has crept into my own adventures and my own near misses and mistakes that I've made. And I think it's just human nature to drop our guard sometimes when we go on an outing that we expect, that we assume will be a certain way. And I think in this case, absolutely, when we get these like kind of positive reinforcing bits of feedback during our adventures and our time in nature, we learn to kind of trust that it usually does work out and that it will work out. And I think that has a way of making us drop our guard, even when we might wake up and be like every single day, say, okay, if you're going to go into nature today, make sure you take every possible precaution. And still, we have this tendency to not do that. I don't believe that anyone is immune from that happening. In this case, in this story, absolutely it played a factor. It played a role. It was a factor in what happened and how this whole ordeal unfolded.
In outdoor training courses, they always talk about take your 10 essentials. And some people have different lists on what really are essential. And it has a lot to do with your skill set and the environment that you're in. But the idea that you have everything that you need for at least short-term survival if things go awry, it just makes so much sense. But I'm guilty myself. I jumped on my motorcycle just this last weekend, and I didn't take my overnight gear. And I thought, well, I'm just going to be on the highway for a little bit. I shouldn't have to worry about it. But that's the kind of thought process that I think can really get us into trouble. You have to be prepared for whatever's going to happen. And do you have recommendations for people, just highlights of recommendations that would say, okay, to stay out of trouble or to get yourself out of trouble, make sure you're at least this prepared?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that reporting on this story changed my view of what is the minimum I should always have. And I've heard from a lot of readers that have said, I now carry this and this and this, and I never used to. I never even used to consider that kind of stuff. So I do think that it's having an impact in that regard. One of the biggest mistakes made was, if you talk to SAR members, search and rescue team members, they always want a subject to be searchable. So in this case, Brett and Cole didn't have their phones with them. And even if your phone is turned off or in a place without service, it still can be helpful to someone finding you, locating you, even in a general area. In this case, nobody knew even a general area where they might be, for a while of the search at least. And so a fire starter, like right now on my kitchen counter, I'm giving a talk at a school later today about the book, and I'm making this little improvised candle that backcountry travelers, some in this book, have carried in their pack for 20 years without ever using it. But it's basically a roll of cardboard that you stick inside like an old soup can or a can of corn or whatever that's empty and dry. And then you fill that can with wax. You just melt wax in there and fill it. And then you light that cardboard, and that thing will burn for hours. And it's a source of heat if you don't have heat. And we think about avalanches being, or a fall, or rocks, or whatever that kind of objective hazard du jour might be in your mind, of kind of being our most ever-present danger in skiing, backcountry skiing. But let's not forget, right? It takes place in winter, and winter is a cold environment and very unforgiving. And if you don't have heat, then you're in trouble. So whether that fire starter, people that I've talked to now carry multiple lighters, fire starter of all kinds, from Fritos to cotton balls and gasoline, a flint stick, all kinds of ways, matches, anything you have that can start a fire when you otherwise might not be able to generate heat is crucial. So there's that. There's, of course, extra food and water, extra layers. There's stuff to fix broken gear, that will prolong your time in an unforgiving environment if you don't have the gear necessary to escape a ravine with a steep wall or something. If your skins don't function correctly, if the glue's not very good on those skins, if you don't have a ski strap or some baling wire to tie your skins to your skis, if the glue fails, all these kind of backup plans. I think that's one thing that we don't usually or instinctively account for, is just like, okay, this is a bomber pair of bindings on great skis, and my skins, I just got them 2 weeks ago. Well, you just can't predict what might happen. You drop your skins in a creek, whatever might happen. And then suddenly their function is compromised. So having these backup plans, these spare parts, these tools that might help you improvise something out in the field are really crucial. And yeah, they weigh more. Well, the alternative to carrying more weight is pretty dire sometimes. So being prepared took on a bit of new meaning for me after reporting this story. And I know that it has for some of the folks who have read this book as well.
I would encourage our listeners, think beyond just the immediacy of the sport. What I mean by that is, if you're going to go in the backcountry, however you get there, snowshoes, skis, whatever it is, if you're going to go in the backcountry in the wintertime, then part of your sport is not just how to ski down a mountain or skin up a mountain. Part of your sport is learning avalanche awareness and avalanche safety. Okay, well, that should be fairly obvious. But another part of your sport is how to survive overnight in the winter in extreme conditions. You need to have those survival skills. That's part of your sport. It's not just skiing, right? And that's what you're talking about. And so it's actually a lot of fun to learn and practice survival skills for every season of the year. Learn how to, create shelter, learn backcountry first aid, learn the dangers of hypothermia and exposure, learn all the things that you need to be able to survive in a difficult situation as a part of the sport that you love. And it's actually a blast to learn that kind of bushcraft. I just think it is so empowering. And so if you're going to ski in the backcountry, skiing is not all the sport. Backcountry is the sport.
Yeah, it's like hypothermia you mentioned, and that's again a big part of this book, and just the exposure to the elements. And I went down this rabbit hole of hypothermia. I talked to a lot of people, including the world expert. He's this guy in Canada, nicknamed Professor Popsicle. He had just retired from a long career as a university professor when I corresponded with him, and we did some interviews and emailing and all that stuff. And he was hugely helpful, but little is understood, I would say, by the mainstream, including, avid adventurers, about that danger. It creeps in.
Yeah.
And the more time that we are out, shivering or whatever, eventually shivering stops. Shivering is a survival mechanism that our bodies have within them, but we are not one of the creatures that generates heat internally without involuntary movement. So yeah, we don't have the advantages that like rodents or things that burrow into the earth do. It wasn't part of our makeup as humans. So we have to account for that deficiency. And as you say, it takes initiative, and it takes a focus on that very low likelihood event actually occurring, and we're all fallible beings. We're imperfect. We make mistakes. I really tried hard to leave little room for judgment in this story, the way that I wrote it. And I tried to report it so thoroughly that the facts would tell it, so it wouldn't leave room for this blame that we see after so many backcountry accidents, because there are really, really brave people who let me into their lives and let me see them, and they're private, and they've been hurting for years from this event. And I wanted to kind of honor that strength in how I reported it and wrote it. And really, like, judgment, it just does so little good. It's like, I did not shy away from the mistakes that were made and our makeup as humans, right? We just simply are, we're fallible. We all are. We all make mistakes, even when we don't think we're going to. And yes, in some ways we have to account for that fallibility in an existential way. And that's, it takes focus and conscious effort.
Absolutely. Have you ever gone through all the hassles of getting on the plane, security, luggage, long waits at the airport, all that kind of stuff, and then when you finally arrive at your destination, not only are you worn out, but you also might feel a little bit disconnected? I know that I do when I hopscotch around the planet on a plane. That's one of the reasons why I love the great American road trips, where you get to drive from one place to another and connect all of those dots. You get to experience the changes in the terrain and the weather and the people and the communities. This is one reason that I am excited to present to you our new sponsor, Outdoorsy. Outdoorsy offers a different way to travel. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or a camper and turn the drive into part of the vacation on your schedule, with your people, and with way more flexibility. Listen, most trips focus on getting somewhere. Outdoorsy is about the part in between. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or a camper and travel on your own terms. No TSA lines, no strict schedules, no rushing through airports. And for extra convenience, Outdoorsy even offers RV delivery and setup in many locations, so you can enjoy the experience without having to worry about the logistics. Outdoorsy connects travelers with trusted RV owners across the country, making it easy to find a rig that fits your style and budget, and I might add, that also fits with the people and the pets that you want to take with you. So when you're ready for a trip that actually feels like a break, head to Outdoorsy.com. Outdoorsy is currently running a special promotion for listeners. Use the promo code ASP at checkout to take advantage of this limited time offer. That's Outdoorsy.com, promo code ASP. Devon, I've made my own mistakes multiple times in all seasons of the year in the backcountry, and had some really close calls. And Luckily, I don't have a tragedy to tell a story about. But I will say that no matter how well you're prepared, things can be surprising. And there's no room for judgment. There really isn't. But if we increase our skill set, then we're mitigating some of the risk. We're playing the odds in our favor, those sorts of things. And I just wanted to encourage the listeners, be prepared, know a little bit about it, right? And I'm not saying that these people were not. I'm saying that the backcountry can be a hazardous place, which kind of leads to, I think, a pressing question. If people can get hurt or even killed in the backcountry doing these things that we love, why do we do it? I think people that have not done the adventures often are like, well, why'd you go out there in the first place, right? Why do we do it, Devon? What's the draw? What's the benefit?
That was a big goal that I had with this book and this story, is informing those who have not found or chosen a life in the mountains, or that really is intimately interconnected with nature, on a daily basis. What is this draw? Why do we live this way, where we do? And I guess, put ourselves out there in some people's view every day when we go on our trail run or whatever small thing it might be. And I wanted to explain the mountain life, but not in a condescending way. I thought that would be counterproductive. Like, oh, you just don't get it. It's so much better than what you see.
Right. That doesn't work.
Personally, I feel that way. But I have a lot of friends and family members who really don't understand the why, or what would inspire anybody, let alone their own family member or friend, me, to do this. But I moved to Breckenridge in 2002, was going to stay for a night, and it just grabbed me and kind of never let me go. And it's the same thing in Salida. It's a town at 7,000 feet. The Arkansas River runs right through downtown. It's ringed by big peaks, has this amazing world-class trail network. It is just its own little nook of utopia in some ways. And I wanted to let people in, the mainstream readers who might not understand that, and show this like unbelievable, difficult to describe fulfillment. So I did that through the characters in the book and their own stories. A lot of them came from non-mountainy places, Kansas, Ohio, just really all over, and show them what's behind these choices. It is this like intoxicating draw. And yet you can't get the draw without a little peril. No matter what you're doing or where, there is always the chance of some weird freak thing happening, and then nature takes hold and it can consume us. And I also kind of, we've been talking a little bit about judgment, and judgment arose in the wake of this accident. There were these kind of barbs, these darts thrown at the survivors. Like, how could you do that? How could you go skiing in the backcountry with a minor? Why would you go into this environment even? What are you doing, you people, kind of thing? And so I wanted to defend mountain life. Again, not in an antagonistic way, but in an explanatory way. And hopefully just enlighten somebody, because it's a life. We lived on a sailboat in the Virgin Islands. I was born in Connecticut, but then grew up mainly in the Virgin Islands and went to school on a different island from where we lived, and all these things, right? I did not understand what mountain life was. But my grandpa was in the 10th Mountain Division, and he died right before my twin brother and I were born. So we never got to meet him. But then here we were rolling through Colorado, 22 years old, stopped for one night, and it just grabbed us. And I've been here ever since. I live at 10,200 feet, and it's really a rewarding version of life to me. But I know that it's not to everybody, and it's hard. You sacrifice a lot. I once wrote an essay called What It Takes and Why It's Worth It, and it was all about this life. So it's not a real clear, easy to distill equation, but for those who, like me, feel just home in this environment, it's the only place and way we want to live. And so I really wanted to like get that across through this book without, again, it being this like direct, forced part of any of the story.
That makes me want to read the book even more, Devon. I align with that. You know, we raised our family at 8,600 feet, not quite 10,000, but people would come up in the summertime and buy a house because they love the cool air. They love the smell of the pines. There's a romance about it, a draw. And then every spring, there'd be a whole new crop of for sale signs that would pop up. And when I say a crop, I mean dozens of for sale signs, staked at the end of all the road intersections. I finally just started telling people, it's not a location, it's a lifestyle. And if you understand that lifestyle, then great, you'll probably love it here. But if you think it's just a cool location, then dig a little deeper first.
Not literally, because the whole issue is they don't want to shovel snow.
Yeah, they have to dig out all the time. Yeah, and I mean, where we got the upslope events constantly, and we had an average of about 10 feet of snow a year. And the big years, we might have 16 feet of snow that year. In the small years, it might be only 6. Where you are is probably even more than that. But it is a lifestyle, and it is not just a different place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a quote in the book that says that exact thing.
Well, and it's not for everybody, and there's no judgment for people that would say, well, that's not for me. I totally get that. But I was like you. 10 years old, my family drove to Colorado. We went on a vacation here. I stepped out of the car. I took a breath, and I said, this is home. It took me a while to get here. I think that people that get it. It's just like you stepped out of the car in Breckenridge, and wow, made a life there. It's amazing. What are some of the surprises that you think people have when they first move into a mountain community and think, okay, I'm here? What are the unexpecteds?
The moment the sun goes down, it gets way cold. That's kind of jarring to some. I also think that it took me even a couple of years to realize that the bounty wasn't the ski resort. It wasn't like the trails right from town. It was this like massive surrounding allowance of public land that's open to everybody. Mm-hmm. And, that is, I think it's a bit of a light bulb moment when it went off for me, but it's not just about what's in these towns. There's great community there. I've found, and I should say, Salaida's community, I've been living in one and have been reporting in many for years and years. Salaida's community is the most tightly knit mountain community I've ever come across.
Wow, that's
that
great.
Was a unique factor within this story was trying to earn the trust of them while asking about something really hard that had permeated their beings, their community for years at that point. But, going back to your question, I think stuff that surprises people is like, man, so you want to see like a medical specialist, you got to go to Denver. You want to take a plane, you got to go to Denver. You got to do like all these things that aren't available in these places. And I think that's probably what drives people out too. They have this like romanticized version sometimes of like what it can be to live in the mountains, to move to the mountains. And I think, we've seen an explosion in cost of living and livability in general and prices on all kinds of things. And I think that's because a lot of people are willing to pay like what's worth it to them monetarily is amenities. Good restaurants, having this, having that available, culture, all that stuff. But to me, it's what surrounds us. It's the natural resources that aren't available elsewhere. Restaurants are everywhere. Cool cultural things are everywhere. Movies, talks, whatever that might be, concerts. But, here it's like you really do you can wake up and go down a list of things that you could do that day that will make you feel more alive than anything in a city. And that menu is always available, day or night, no matter the weather. I went to college in Vermont, and the New England winter is really harsh. It's like it's just like a little bone chillinger.
Oh, yeah.
Wetter, cold. It kind of, I remember it making me want to stay inside. And I would kind of have to like force myself sometimes to get up and go out and do something. And here, I think it could be 20 below. If that sun's shining, as it does, whatever the facts are, like 300 days a year,
Yeah, right.
it just sucks you outside. Like, you can't stay inside. You want to be outside, even if it is that cold. You want to be out there moving through these places that are just so powerful to just simply be in, regardless of like powder going over your head, but just simply standing in them. It's really awesome. But it also is harder to find community. You know, I do a lot of my things solo just because I have this little window in my day. So I go do it while I have the time. I've found that in other places that are not as mountainy or big and tall and high, that there's much more like of a group ride culture or tradition. And there's just more, I think it's why we see a lot of mental health struggles, even in these awesome places. And that was a compounding factor to this accident at the heart of my book, The Way Out. There was a lot of people didn't, there wasn't a lot of group debriefing. It wasn't like, hey, let's gather as a group of 8 and talk about this and figure out how it's like, discuss how it's making us feel and what should it be spurring us to maybe do differently or to reconsider. But people did reevaluate their lives who had been living this life for 20 or 30 years. And they were like, holy cow, if it can happen that quickly on such a benign outing, what am I doing wrong? Am I doing it right? Do I want to keep doing this? Some people backed away from the mountain life. Some people didn't even want to see mountains. And then eventually they returned. And that was a really powerful part of the later part of this book was seeing people kind of come full circle and getting these character arcs that to me were inspiring. They showed amazing strength, but they're still part of this hard thing. So it's just very multi-layered and nuanced. Yeah, the kind of finding that balance individually is something that I think is lifelong, but it can be informed by these stories that pop up here and there and these experiences that others went through and then kind of had to deal with in some way, in this case when it ends poorly. But I think we can take a lot from those and see ourselves in these kinds of stories and think long and hard about what am I doing and is it really what I want to get out of my life? We have our finite time here, and it's kind of this ever-present journey and question of like, am I doing it right for me? And I realized both through the reporting and through this really close call with a massive half-mile wide, 10-foot deep at the crown avalanche that a friend and I triggered during the like heat of the reporting for this book, that I was out there for reasons that weren't true to where I was at that stage in my life as a parent now. And, we our life evolves, we're not 24 anymore, right. Just out there like seeking that thrill, that feeling that is so intoxicating. But I realized I wanted to be there for my kids and didn't necessarily need to have the powder going over my head anymore. So it really changed my perspective in a healthy way, I think. But, I think that's, again, like very idiosyncratic and it makes people think different things. And we really have to be honest with ourselves, too, when we're having these kind of internal dialogues, get to the absolute bone of what you want out of your life and how you're doing it right now, and do those align? And I realize,
and good words
for me.
Yeah, good words, Devon. I agree 100% with that. I had an experience kayaking when my children were very young. That we were on a flooded creek. We were boat scouting it. It wasn't a known route. We were getting ourselves into some sticky situations, and I had a close call there. And that's when I decided that my kids mattered more than what I was doing, and I changed my behavior. But I want to touch on one thing just to kind of balance this conversation. I did an episode about how dangerous our adventure sports are, how safe our adventure sports, as the case may be. And I did quite a lot of research. I dug deep and I said, how many people, are injured doing this or that or the next thing? And what kind of injuries are there? Fatalities or minor injuries? And, you try to say, well, how many people participate? How many people get hurt? I did mountain biking, road biking, skiing, backcountry, rock climbing, mountaineering. I just, you go down the whole list. I did all the major sports. All of them were safer than driving to the trailhead, except one. And the one that actually was as dangerous as driving a car was downhill skiing. But that kind of puts it into alignment. We all jump in our cars and don't think that much about it. We can do these sports safely, but it doesn't mean it's risk-free. People will get hurt, and people actually will get killed doing adventure sports, just like people get hurt and die in cars every single day. So you have to evaluate, am I doing this in a safe way? Am I being responsible? Do I have my priorities right? And then also, what are the benefits? And I have found, I wanted to be there for my family, for my kids, so I changed the way that I was boating. But I also found that introducing my family to adventure sports had so many benefits for my family that outweighed the risks for us. I get it. Tragedy is going to strike, and it gets our attention when it does, and I don't want in any way to minimize what that must be like. But I can also say that if we do things with a touch of wisdom, training, experience, risk mitigation to the point that we can, kind of gets at the heart to what really living is, I think, Devon. We can try to live as safely as we can, and we may not really be living. Or we can figure out what real life feels like to us and how to do that in the safest way possible.
That's why it's so individual. It's not as simple as saying don't go. I'm not willing to not go. Almost everybody in this book are not willing to not go.
Yeah.
Because it is too rewarding. So that's why some of these questions don't really have answers. If you bring them up and you present both sides like in a detailed fashion and with respect to the frankly, like very fair arguments to be made on both sides.
Yeah.
Then you let the person decide for themselves and for their own family. And absolutely, like introducing this stuff the way my wife and I live to our sons is greatly rewarding. And it's essential. When I first heard about the story in this book, I contacted a real key source. And she said, I give you my blessing to pursue this, but only if it's not something that tells people don't go,
right.
Because this can happen. And I was like, oh, good. I'm not willing to tell people don't go. I don't believe that myself. I think that it really comes down to just give yourself the best chance if something goes wrong and still go. And choose your environment. Choose your, the pitch of your ski descent wisely based on the conditions and what you really want out of that day. And, I realized that my wants and needs were confused for myself. I thought I needed to go do these big bad things, and I need to be out there, but I want the big bad thing. I want that thrill and the feeling. I didn't need that. And it comes with stress, when you're going to do a big thing, you're just like, I'm at least a little fearful that day. And I realized like even that fear of going to it's awesome still. And it like just fills you with this kind of tingle, but it's not all great. Kind of stressed me out. So yeah, I think find it for yourself. And that's why I think these stories are helpful. They inform us. They can broaden our perspective. What can go wrong? Okay, let me protect for that one that I never really had considered before, that potential outcome or something. But ultimately, it's just, we got this limited time. And to sit around and not go just because there's this minuscule chance that something could end poorly is not the answer for me, at least.
Will you share with us a story about a hut trip that you've done and help the listeners who have never done anything like this? They've never been in the backcountry in the wintertime. Maybe they've never even been to the mountains, but help them to get a little insight into what you experience when you go into the backcountry on one of these hut trips and what the draw is.
Yeah, there's multiple versions of a hut trip. You can go to something really far and remote and hard to get to, and with, big peaks to ski. You can go to one that's a mile from the parking lot that you can take your kids to. It's a very easy, straightforward get into the hut, and there's not big bad terrain, and you're really just there to like poke around, nowhere farther than like a quarter mile from the hut. And so our sons are 10 and 7, and we take them on more of the latter version. Francie's cabin, one of the huts that I help maintain through the Summit Huts Association, is really close to our house, and we went there last year, and that's a very popular hut. It's the most booked hut in Colorado for a reason. It's beautiful. It's in the Crystal Creek drainage, this like stunning just cirque of wildness around you, and there's a crackling fire, and you make your own food, and you're hanging out reading and playing cards, and just like really quality time with those who you are there with. Then there's the trips that once a year I do with a group of friends, and we're all dudes in our 30s, 40s. I think a couple guys have just touched 50 now, but I'm 46. And, you know, we go to the farther away hut, and we hope that the conditions will allow us to go do something safe, but maybe a little more on that kind of thrill side, conditions dependent, of course. But it's still like you are in the middle of nowhere. Your cell phones don't work. You are a unit. You're laughing. You are telling jokes. You're talking about, I mean, we go around in a circle on those trips and just talk about our year and like, how are things with your family, with your spouse, with your friends? Like, are you getting out of life what you want to be getting out? And that's a different version of fulfillment than the trips that I take with kids. I just took my son, for these Hutmaster shifts. We have little Hutmaster quarters at each hut, and I took my 10-year-old up to Sister's cabin on Bald Mountain, a different aspect, but the same mountain where this giant avalanche spared me and my friend 4 years ago. And, you know, we went up and had this awesome thing, and he had never really like done a backcountry ski run. And of course, we're on this very, very low angle slope. There's no avalanche danger, but it was amazing to watch him be empowered by the fact that he can do this. And to show that to him, to be the portal through which he gets to experience it, albeit, you know, here I am with like this wounded, aging lower back problem, and I'm carrying 50 pounds because he can't shoulder that kind of weight yet, and we need all the things and the food and the safety gear and all that stuff. And he's on alpine trekkers, and like all the muck of that kind of trip is dwarfed by the reward, the fulfillment as a dad, and watching your kid get his perspective completely changed by the fact that this is available to him and he can do it physically. And now he's gaining the knowledge to do it. And it's right above the town where he lives and goes to school. And, you know, it's just like a really powerful thing. And I would, you know, not everybody has the same view of that or desire or ability or whatever. But for those that do, it's a really cool thing. And there are absolutely novice-friendly huts. And just to go in there with yourself or with one friend or with 10 friends, you know, it's a really cool part of the life that we get to lead here. And granted, as we know from this Lake Tahoe avalanche, which also involved a hut trip 2.5 weeks ago, horrible things can happen from some of this stuff. So it's essential. You're going into a wild area. It's essential that you know exactly where you are at all times, and you're prepared for the conditions you might encounter and all that stuff. So it's like, and all that stuff makes your pack heavier. It makes your lower back hurt more. And, you know, it's just, the equation's got to be one where the overall impression is worth it.
Every time we talk about backcountry skiing, I always stress the avalanche safety. You need to take the courses. And that's not so you can ski avalanche terrain. It's so that maybe you'll choose not to, or you'll understand a little bit about how to hedge your bets. What recommendations do you have for people when it comes to avalanche safety?
Yeah, courses are important, I think. I've never taken an avalanche safety course, and I've been backcountry skiing for more than 20 years, and I have been very lucky to have had amazing mentors and to have lived in a place where it's right out the door and where you can just go spend time in that environment. And, you know, the moment I'm on, it's weird, but like you just gain these sensual awareness of where you are and whether you're in danger and all that stuff. So I think just time spent, and if you can find a mentor, it's really important to not duck from any of the lessons that are available to you at all times out there, you know, eyes and ears, all that stuff, but digging into the snow, so you learn a little bit more about, especially in a continental snowpack like we have in Colorado with really dry snow that's prone to avalanching more than a maritime snowpack. It's just really essential to learn as much as you possibly can at all times and to steel yourself against complacency and against thinking that because you've gotten away with it before, because that's really what it is when you ski an avalanche slope in any kind of objective danger. It's you get away with it, you guess right. And I've gotten lucky many times, and also I've triggered or been in a party that triggered some big not good avalanches. And if you can walk away from those experiences, I think that's really important, to absorb every shred of lesson that's available in these things.
Absolutely. I think sometimes, well, I'm just going to put a public service announcement. Having taken the AVI training courses doesn't make you immune to what avalanches can do. And most of the people that get hurt or die in avalanches actually have been trained. But most of the people that are in the place where an avalanche could be get the training for safety purposes. So I don't know that those two things really correlate, except to say knowledge is important. And just as a general, for people that are from out of state, you see this beautiful couloir, the trees open up, it looks like powder, it's bottomless, and you think, oh, that's it, that's so rad, I'm going to jump into that one. The reason the trees aren't there is because avalanches take the trees out. That's an avalanche slide zone. If it looks awesome, that's probably the place you might want to think twice about. Just don't be sucked in by the siren's call. Learn to read the snow, learn what slope angle's about, and be safe.
Yeah.
Devon, I appreciate your candor in this conversation, and I appreciate the way that you reported the story of it. The book is The Way Out, and the story is tragic, but it's also a story about community and mountain living and why we do these things. And I think that everyone can gain by experiencing secondhand what others have gone through. I think it makes us to make better choices, maybe. Part of our responsibility is to make sure that we learn what we can, gain the experience that we can, and then we share that experience with others so that they can be safer too. Look for mentors, all the things you've already described. I just think it's part of what mountain life is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where can people find the book?
Oh, it's available in any independent bookstore, and certainly in any mountain town or most cities. And of course, Amazon, any other online retailer, bookshop.org. It's out there. You won't, if you know how to Google, you'll find it.
Yeah, if you just Google Devon O'Neill, you'll find it, I'm sure. Do you have a website, Devon, where people can learn more?
Yeah, it's just DevonO'Neill.com, so DevonO'Neill.com. There's plenty of information about the book there as well, reviews and link to get the book if you're interested.
I have the honor of interviewing a lot of authors, Devon, and I read through all the books that I can, and I can't wait to read through yours, but I didn't get it read in advance of the interview, which would have been fantastic, but you did a wonderful job of encapsulating the flavor of the book, the nature of the book, the mission of the book, and it sounds wonderful. So thank you for putting the energy and the effort into sharing the story of these families and the story of what backcountry mountaineering is about. Thank you for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kurt. Appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. And for all of you out there, make sure that you learn to do it safely, but make sure you do get out there and have some fun.